Islam, not only during the time that he was there, but he has really dived deep into Islam. And he speaks all around the country on Islam, equipping Christians throughout the nation, in churches, and speaking at different organizations. So he and I have a heart for the Muslims throughout the world. We want to see Muslims come to repentance and faith in the true Jesus Christ of the Bible, not the Isa of the Qur'an. But right here in between Joe and myself, we have Narain Anwiya, and she is an Assyrian-American activist for Christians in the Middle East. A political activist as well in Washington, D.C., and she informs people about what is happening to Christians and other minorities in the Middle East as well. So, Narain, it is a blessing for you to be here with us on this show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on, and glad to express as many details as I can about what's truly happening in the Middle East for the Christians.
Thank you. And if our audience is not aware of what is happening in the Middle East, Narain's going to give you a lot of information to think about. Some of it may line up with what you are seeing on the mainstream media, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're leaving a lot out, or if even some of it's even contradictory. So we hope to give you a lot of information in this show, because this is a vital topic indeed. But we also have a couple of Skype guests with us as well. Our first Skype guest is Akil Onkyu. He was born and raised in New Jersey and became an avid student of knowledge as a late teenager. He has studied and taught beginners Arabic, Tajweed, and Islamic beliefs and practices to new Muslims extensively. Akil has also studied with esteemed scholars in California at the Zaytuna Institute, where he completed an intensive course on the Arabic language. He has traveled to Mauritania and was privileged to continue his studies under some of the most eminent Islamic scholars of that area. He is currently an active member of the local masjid, conducting seasonal courses on Arabic and Islamic beliefs and practices, and he occasionally lectures in various neighboring masjids as well. And if you were here for our other shows, and even if you weren't, you're going to be able to see these on the Trinity Channel's YouTube channel. You'll see Akil, and that he is a regular on this show. He recently had a debate with C.L. Edwards as well. But Akil, we want to welcome you back on another show this week.
How are you, Tony? And how are you guys?
Good. Doing well. Doing well. Our second Skype guest is Rocky Nasser. She is a speaker, evangelist, and author. She put her trust in the Lord Jesus Christ on August 2nd, 1998. Since then, she has earned a bachelor's degree in biblical studies from Criswell College and a master's of theology in evangelism and discipleship from Dallas Theological Seminary. Her testimony has been featured in today's Christian Woman magazine, and she has contributed a chapter to a book titled Voices Behind the Veil, The World of Islam Through the Eyes of Women. She speaks at congregations, conferences, seminars, and on radio stations across the nation, and we are expecting her to be here right now. We actually had a little Skype issue, so we're going to get her back on here in just a few minutes, but she will be on the show. Oh, she's ready. Okay, great. Rocky, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Tony. How are you?
We are doing great. I'm not sure if you heard me. I just introduced you, told our guests, our audience all about you, so they're excited to hear what you have to say. But those who don't know who Rocky is, if you did not see the show the other day that she was on, she is a former Muslim herself. She was born in the Middle East. She was a Muslim for 31 years until she came to realize the truth of Christianity, the God of the Bible and the Jesus of the Bible. And when she repented and put her trust in Christ, the Holy Spirit has confirmed the truthfulness of the Bible to her. So we want to welcome her back to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Rocky.
Thanks so much for having me.
So our show, again, is called Shari'ah versus Freedom and Human Rights. But some of our audience, because this is being broadcast live to the Middle East, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Canada, etc., some people may not actually know what Sharia is. They probably know what freedom and human rights is. Hopefully they do. If they don't, we hope that they can experience it sometime in the future. But Joe, how would you define Sharia?
Well, Sharia is a comprehensive set of rules, regulations, laws that dictate every aspect of a Muslim's behavior. From everything they do when they wake up in the morning to everything they do when they go to bed at night and everything in between. It addresses financial transactions. It addresses relations between people, marriage, divorce, crimes, punishment. Every aspect that a society would have laws for, Sharia is those set of laws for Muslims living in Islamic nations. And it's all based on the example that the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad himself, set.
Okay. And we have our only guest on the show who is a Muslim. That is Akil, and it is a blessing to have him here. He's been on a number of shows with us already, and he has another one tomorrow night as well. But Akil, we want to give you the opportunity, if you heard everything that Joe just said, I want to ask you if you agree with his definition, and if not, what would you, or maybe if you want to add something to it, what do you think?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. What he said, I think, is correct. It's the general overview of what the Sharia is. Linguistically, Sharia, it means a desert road that leads to fresh water. And symbolically, I mean, as it represents the Islamic definition, it's a path that God has given us by which we have attained salvation, by which we obtain His pleasure and His grace by following the ordinances that He gave for humanity to follow. It's very comprehensive, and it includes both the Muslim lives as well as how the Muslim interacts with those who are not from the Muslim faith. So it is very comprehensive, and introduction would not allow us to cover everything, but basically I think that's sufficient to begin the conversation.
Okay, so yeah, we don't, I mean, we can go into more details later on. But you, as a Muslim, we would expect you to try your best, as much as you can, to obey Sharia and allow that to basically guide your life. Would that be correct? Well,
I mean, it's not necessarily obey Sharia. Sharia is the means by which we obey God. We don't want to make Sharia somehow a God by which we worship the Sharia. And I think that this is probably a misunderstanding of the people. We obey God, and this is the reason why we created, to serve and obey and love God. And God has given us ways to do that. Our worship or our reverence or our way of life towards God should not be arbitrary and be dictated by secular systems that may have not the interest of God at all in it. So the Sharia is a way by which, if we follow it, we know we're following the ordinance of God to obtain His pleasure and His salvation that He offers to those who follow so.
Okay. And I just want to give you a quick question before we go to our next guest. Do you think it would be a good thing if the entire world followed Sharia?
Would it be a good thing?
If everyone in the world followed Sharia? I mean, obviously Muslims, yes, but I mean, if everyone else became Muslims, that would be a good thing, I would think, from an Islamic perspective. But do you think if every country was under Sharia, that would be a good thing? I mean, your opinion as a Muslim.
In the ideal world, yes, because Sharia is the ideal. And we've seen close to the ideal during the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and right behind him. So this is the aspiration of humanity, to follow the ordinances of God. But in the Qur'an, quite clearly, Allah makes it clear that everybody would not accept the faith, and it's upon them to strive, to God the best way they can and live with humanity in the best way possible. But in the end, they have to stand judgment before God for the ways they follow. So ideally, yeah, in the utopia, to everybody to follow Sharia under authoritative, righteous, upright, obedient Muslim leader, yes, we will want to aspire to something like that, because we will see beautiful things as we have seen in the past in Muslim history. But unfortunately, with corruption comes also corruption of leaders, and if the leaders are corrupt, then also the implementation of Sharia can also be corrupt. And this is what we're seeing now in many Muslim lands, which is a terrible display of the Sharia, because the people in charge are not representative of Islam, and they also make Islam look something unappealing to the people.
Okay. Well, going to our next Skype guest, we have Rocky Nasser, who, again, grew up in the Middle East, and she was a Muslim for 31 years. Rocky, what knowledge do you have about Sharia, either possibly growing up under Sharia or living in the area where you knew other people, maybe family members who are living under Sharia. What can you share with our worldwide audience of what you know about it, and what was life like under it, that kind of thing?
Sure. Well, I know that, it encompasses everything, as Joe had mentioned, and as Akil had mentioned, it encompasses when you pray 5 times a day, that's the Sharia law. When women wear the head covering, that's the Sharia law. When women treat their husbands a certain way, that's certainly Sharia law. And so I think there's a misconception in the United States about what the Sharia law is, because we automatically think the Sharia law is a governmental law, but as Joe mentioned, it encompasses everything. I think what I've noticed in differences between the Sharia law and between grace, so there's law and there's grace, is that with the Sharia law, what it is doing is it's changing the outer behavior of people and controlling the outer behavior of people, whereas with grace and with Christ comes a transformational, from the inside, it's the heart that eventually changes the actions of people. Okay. So you can be a good person, but on the inside, you can be a total jerk, basically.
Okay, so it's easy to be a hypocrite or be labeled a hypocrite based on how you live, what you think, what you believe on the inside, how you act on the outside, that kind of thing.
Sure, and the most important thing that we have to recognize is, what is the attitude of the heart? How does the heart respond? Is it a heart response, or is it just a behavioral response? I recall times when I have prayed and I wouldn't even think about God or who God is, and it was just a rote thing to me, without having a heart change or an attitudinal change. So
okay.
That's what I recognized. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Now, Rain, what do you know about Sharia? People who you know who live under Sharia or have lived under Sharia, possibly in the past, and are not living under it now. What do you know? What have you heard from other people? I mean, you talk with people in the Middle East all the time, people who have left the Middle East, who are still there. So what can you share with our audience?
Absolutely. And besides being a median in between the people in Iraq and Syria and the Western countries, but I also have lived in Iraq myself. I am an Assyrian Christian who are the natives in Iraq. And the Sharia law, or the radical Islam in the Middle East, is not a very friendly thing to not just any other non-Muslims, but even to Muslims, moderate Muslims themselves. It is a horrendous political movement. I think of it, instead of a religion under God, it's more like a political movement for the people that are just extreme radicals. I mean, as a child, I was almost kidnapped by Muslims, Kurdish Muslims, who are in northern Iraq. And people, my people in Iraq and Syria, they are hung, burned alive, drowned. Young girls as young as 7 years old and 5 years old are being sold into sex slavery under the Sharia law. They claim that they're giving us a right to pay a jizya, but that is actually a lie. A lot of Christians that went to go pay the jizya were killed and either kidnapped. Anybody who speaks against it or even tries to voice their opinions, they are kidnapped, they're found in ditches. This is the reality of the Middle East, especially of what's happening currently with the genocide against Assyrian Christians, against Yazidis, against any minorities, especially Christians, the most persecuted religion in the world, under radical Islam in the Middle East. And this Wahhabism has taken a whole nother level. It's evolving every day. It is an international, it's also an international issue. It's a national security issue, because I want to be able to walk our streets as we are civilized humans and not worry about some jihadist killing my children or kidnapping my daughter or killing my husband because he's trying to defend his Christian family, or our homes being taken, our properties, just because we are Christian. You know, and this is the life that they're living under the Daesh, under the ISIS regime in the Middle East, and it's horrendous. I'm not sure any of even our, you know, moderate Muslim friends would ever want to live under this type of ruling.
Yeah. Well, we do have a Muslim on our show today. I'm not sure what he would label himself. He would consider himself a moderate or something else, but we have an opportunity to ask him. Akil, when you, listening to what Narain just said, what do you think? I mean, when you look to the Middle East today, and then you compare that to the Quran and to the Hadith, which we would think that you're familiar with, do you see some differences there? You see similarities? What do you see?
First and foremost, let me say that I'm sorry for her experiences. I mean, my apologies may not do anything for her. But I'm sorry that she had to suffer the fate she suffered there, her family, and the fear that she experienced as a Muslim, because this doesn't represent me as a Muslim and what I believe in Islam. There's a tradition from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as it relates to the dhimmi, Ahlul Dhimma, and he said that whoever harms a person under dhimma, I will be their advocate on the day of judgment against whoever harms them. So the Prophet was very staunch about making sure that anyone under the dhimma contract was always taken care of and made sure that no harm came to them, because it was a contract that they had with the Islamic State to make sure that they were protected. So what's happening today in many of the Muslim worlds, if not all of them, is not a demonstration of Islam. Unfortunately, we fail to realize that there is a foreign policy that exists in the world that frustrates and disenfranchises many of the people there, and it causes them to do and behave in ways that's unprofessional and unreligious. And because they're doing it in the name of Islam, does not dictate what Islam is. We need to go back to what the Qur'an actually says and its correct implementation, and go back to what the Prophet Muhammad said and its also correct implementation. But what we're seeing today is pale in regards to that, and I as a Muslim am affected by it because it does make me look bad. But I'm not ashamed whatsoever of Islam or what the precepts of the Shari'ah, but I am ashamed of the Muslims that implement these things around the world.
Okay, and was one of the terms that it sounded like you had said dhimmi or dhimmitude? Is that the term that you were using?
Yeah, Ahl Dhimma, because she mentioned about the people there in Syria or in Iraq under Muslim rule. So when a state is an Islamic state, the people that lives under them are called Ahl Dhimma. It's a contract that they have, and it's the tax that they have to be assured security and protection and their well-being, and to live their life under that state. It's a tax, just as a Muslim also has a tax that's due upon them. But that tax that they pay secures their freedom, their security, and their well-being. And again, what's happening today is not a demonstration of Islam, because again, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said, whoever harms Ahl Dhimma, he will be the advocate for the person who's harmed. And he also said that whoever harms them harms me, and whoever harms me has annoyed God because I'm sent from God.
Okay, and I want to give it to Narain, but I want to ask you first, Akil. The dhimmis, they pay the jizya tax, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, what percentage or what amount is that? I mean,
it varies, and also one thing needs to be understood, that just like also for the Muslim tax, if the people of Dhimma cannot afford the tax, it's not forced upon them to pay it. If they cannot afford it, if they're poor and they cannot afford to pay the tax, just as in the Muslim tax, there's a tax called zakat, which is due upon the Muslim. If he cannot afford to pay the tax, then it is not forced upon him. But what will happen is, from the public treasury, these taxes will be paid on their behalf, and they will be protected. So the percentage may differ and vary on the individual, but the tax for the dhimma is actually less, or supposed to be less, than what is paid by the Muslims, the Muslim tax of zakat, which is 2.5% of a person's annual wealth after reaching the nisab. So 2.5% is a very small amount, and the Ahl Dhimma, their percentage of tax is actually less than that.
Less. You're saying the dimitude tax is less than the zakat,
Then the zakat tax that's imposed upon the Muslims, yes.
which is 2.5.
The Muslim tax is 2.5,
Okay.
and Ahl Dhimma tax is actually less than that, yes.
Okay, so I want to give it to Narain, then I want to go to Joe to kind of tell our audience the difference between zakat and jizya. But we also have a caller as well who we want to go to, so we're already starting to line up with stuff. We do encourage you to call in and so you can ask questions to our guests. But Narain, would you like to respond to Akil?
Yeah, absolutely. Akil, so Assyrians, who are also religiously known as Chaldeans and Syriacs, they are the cradlers of civilization. We have been living in those areas for almost 7,000 years. We literally invented those cities and everything from the basis of all technology in that area, and we spread it to the whole world. These people who invented the battery, the first wheel, the first library, you're telling us that we have been living there for thousands of years and that we will be forced to pay a tax when we haven't paid that tax. And for you, for example, you're saying that this is not the radical Islamic views of what they're practicing, for example, Daesh in the Middle East. But then when other people tell them, well, this isn't, when other Muslims, the moderate Muslims, tell Daesh and ISIS that, you know what, you are not the real Muslims, and then they respond with, well, basically, now you deserve the death penalty because we are the real Muslims. You're not the real Muslims. This is how Prophet Muhammad, this is the way of Islam. This is the way it's supposed to be. So they're very offended when Daesh is being, or ISIS in American terms, are being told that they're not real Muslims. So what is your response to ISIS when they say they're not, that they are the real Muslims and the moderate Muslims are not practicing the true ways of how the Prophet and his followers were in these ancient times?
With all due respect to you, I can really care less what ISIS think about who they are because their actions show otherwise. I mean, as I mentioned, I premised the hadith of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he said that whoever harms a dhimmi, ahl dhimma, then he's an advocate for the person harmed on the day of judgment against whoever harms him. And he said, whoever harms him has harmed me, and whoever harms me has offended God who has sent me. So if ISIS are claiming that they're following the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, then why are they harming innocent people under their jurisdiction? On top of that, they're killing Muslims. The majority of the victims of ISIS and Daesh are Muslims that's being killed.
Currently, yes. Currently, they are a lot more Muslims because there are a lot more Muslims in in numbers. However, there are a lot more Christians that have been killed throughout history because at a point we were 30 million. Akil, now in Iraq alone we're only 300,000. So technically, if you're counting the genocide and how long it's been lasting, the Christians are the most highest persecuted religion in the Middle East. And especially Assyrian Christians, because we're almost annihilated under the Islamic jihadist rule.
And Akil, let me make clear. We thank God for you, and we thank God for all the shows that you come on to talk with us. We really appreciate you being here and being a voice as a Muslim. And what we want to do, though, I mean, we look to ISIS. We look to even people who aren't part of ISIS, but are basically, they agree with what ISIS is doing. Okay, there are Muslims, as you know, throughout the world, 1.6 billion, and we know that a large percentage of Muslims in the world are not jihadists, militant, extremists, etc. But are they not because they have a completely different understanding of Islam, or are they just not following what Muhammad would have them do? I mean, there are scholars who have said that if Muhammad was alive today, he wouldn't only join ISIS, he would lead it, because they look to the primary sources and what he did. But we have two callers, and I want to give you a time, Akil. I'm going to give you time to talk. But before you go to the callers, I told Joe I wanted him to kind of differentiate between zakat and jizya.
Yeah, very quickly, just for the audience that may not be familiar with those two terms. Zakat is the obligatory tax. It's one of the 5 basic pillars of Islam, which is enjoined upon every Muslim. And it's an annual tax. They pay 2.5% of their entire net worth, not just income. So it would be businesses, anything that constitutes worth. monetary worth. 2.5% goes to an Islamic charity every year to fund Islamic charitable organizations.
Okay.
In contrast, the jizya, as Akil properly noted, was a tax imposed upon particularly Christians and Jews living in Muslim nations. For those who want an excellent research book to study about this topic further, Professor Mark Dury, Dr. Mark Dury, has written an excellent book called The Third Choice, Islam, Dimitude, and Freedom, where he talks about the whole history of the jizya and where that came about and how the jizya is paid to the Muslim overlords and so forth. Oh. It comes from Surah 9, verse 29, which says, "Fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which is forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, especially among the people of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued." Okay. And as Akil noted, the common idea put forth among Muslims is that this jizya is a protection tax levied upon Christians and Jews living in Muslim nations so that they can be protected by the Muslim society. They're free to continue their worship, but on the other hand, they're made second-class citizens. They can't own property. They have no voting rights. They're basically non-persons for the sake of society.
Okay. So it's not pay this amount to be equal to us. It's pay this amount and you're still lower than us.
Yeah, and one thing Mark Dury brings up in his book is that the jizya is really imposed, when you look at the history of jizya and how it came about, in the whole process, there's the whole ritual that goes about in how that jizya is supposed to be paid to the Muslim overseer. And essentially, the jizya is paid for the right to keep your head on your shoulders.
Okay. Well, we want to go to our two callers. Like I said, we do encourage you to call in. We have another Skype guest as well, Rocky Nasser, who grew up in the Middle East, and we want to get to her as well. But let's go to our first caller. I believe his name is Matt. Matt, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello, thank you for calling in.
Yes, I would like to say about what Nahrin is talking about. Yes, Assyrians made a lot of accomplishments. How long can I talk for?
We are just wanting questions only, please.
Okay. No comments?
If it's short, we don't want to give you like 10 minutes of the show because it's only 90 minutes long. But let's give you 2 minutes.
Okay. There's a book called Islam's Teachings and Terror: The Full Truth, Islamophobia and the Political Prostitution by Abu al-Haq al-Haqqani. It's a great book, and it cites Islamic fascism by Hamid Abdul Samad. And this book mentions, really, to be really quick, the author mentions that according to Islamic scriptures, Muhammad the Prophet had a peace treaty with a Jewish tribe called Bani Qurayza, and to help him fight. And later on, he broke that peace treaty with that tribe, and all by himself in one day beheaded all 800 men in that tribe, and had his henchmen take the women and children as slaves and sex slaves. That was an act of genocide that prefigured Hitler's Holocaust.
Okay. Thank you for calling in, Matt. I believe what Matt is referring to, I mean, we do find what not the exact details there. I think the number in the book is actually higher, but we would recommend to our viewers to go to bookstore, Amazon, etc., look up The Life of Muhammad by Ibn Ishaq. This is the oldest biography on Muhammad. But it's still kind of a problem because it was written about 150 years after Muhammad died. So that's a problem right there. But this is the oldest biography, and it does say that according to that, the Banu Qurayza clan was the last major surviving Jewish presence in Medina. At the point of feeling completely overpowered and without hope, they chose to surrender. Muhammad had his men dig a number of trenches, and according to the earliest biographer, again Ibn Ishaq, Muhammad sent for them and struck off their heads in those trenches as they were brought out to him in batches. There were 600 or 700 in all, though some put the figure as high as 800 or 900. This is actually on page 464 of Ibn Ishaq's Sirat Rasulullah. So that book was written down before any of us were alive, quite some time ago. So that is one of the primary sources. This is the Sirah literature. This is the biographical literature of Muhammad. It's not the Qur'an. So what I just read is not supposedly the eternal word of God that we have in the Quran today, or even the Hadith, which are the things that Muhammad said, did, and approved, but the Sirah literature, the biography. So we do have another caller we want to get to. I believe we had Lewis was the next one. Do we have Lewis on the line? Lewis, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you for watching the show, Lewis.
Yeah, my question is regarding Dima, and specifically with the references to Islamic states right now by your Muslim host or guest right there.
Yeah.
Reading The Reliance of the Traveler, which is an accepted book on Islamic law or jurisprudence, and agreed upon by the four major schools of Islamic law.
Mm-hmm.
He is contradicting the concept of dimitude, because that is, as your other guest correctly said, it comes from the Quran in verse 9, chapter 9, verse 29. This is under the context of warfare and subjugation. It is not a general tax that you apply on someone. It's actually extortion money to protect somebody if they follow the Islamic laws and rules, which you will find in the Reliance of the Traveler on section 0.11.0 under Muslim subjects of the Islamic State. This is not a common agreement and contract without any coercion. The implications in the context is warfare and subjugation, and those that are under the dimitude are subjects of their masters, and if they don't comply, the penalty is death or expulsion. And for him to dismiss the Islamic State globally right now as not properly representing Islam, I don't know where his authority comes from, but I would like to hear a response.
Okay. Akil, let's give you a couple of minutes for a response.
Okay, first, let me deal with the first caller, and then I'll come back to the second caller claims. First, the history books of the Muslims, Ibn Ishaq and like that, it's unfair and disingenuous to read quotes from there without also reading the disclaimers of these historians. When they wrote their books, they put in the beginning that we are biographers, we are historians, and we are writing everything that came to us that we heard, without verification of its sources being authentic or not. So you'll find things in Ibn Ishaq's work that's not authentic. It's fabrication, but because it was a story that was presented at the time, they still included it in the books as to compile everything that was mentioned at the time. So people who read Ibn Ishaq and other works have to be careful about everything they read in there, because it's not sound transmissions upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Second of all, the idea of Bain al-Qurayza, there was a contract that the Muslims had a treaty with the Jews of Bain al-Qurayza, and what happened, there was an antagonistic aggression from the Meccans to the city of Medina. And the Muslims built a trench around the entire front part of the city to protect themselves from the invasion of the Meccans. And Bain al-Qurayza was housed in the back of the city. Now, because they had a contract with the Muslims, they would defend the city and fight with the Muslims under any aggression. What happened is Bain al-Qurayza made a contract with the Meccans to siege the Muslims, and they broke the treaty. When the battle ended, which wasn't much of a battle because it was severe weather and they had to retreat from their aggression, the Prophet Muhammad went to Bain al-Qurayza and addressed them about their breaking of the treaty. And they realized that they were wrong. They asked for an arbitrator. The Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, sent someone that used to be amongst them, a man by the name of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, and he actually gave judgment upon Bain al-Qurayza and as relates to their actions. And he gave it to them according to Jewish law. And not only that, he gave it to them upon the most lenient aspect of it, because according to Jewish law, treason was punishable by death by everybody of the village. And he said only punish the men that was included, and it was nowhere near 800. I mean, the number was about maybe 400, and some people say even it was only those that was most responsible for it, and that wasn't even in the hundreds. So, I mean, this is a fact of history that people love to fabricate against the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And finally, about that, the Jewish leader, he said that he had judged against us fairly, and even more so than that, because he gave us the most lenient of punishment. I wish we stopped lying upon Islamic history and upon the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to further an Islamic phobic agenda. It's unfair, and it doesn't befit religious people as Christians and Jews and Muslims. This is unbefitting. As relates to 929, the second caller, and the jizya, this also is contextual. The Muslims were going to a meet with the Byzantines at that time, and who were of the Christian faith, and this was the verse that was given to them. And the reason that this battle occurred is because the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sent an envoy to them, and he was killed. So in retaliation of that, they went to go and address this, and the verse was revealed about these Jews and Christians. That was the case. In the Qur'an, Allah quite clearly says that the Muslim man can marry a Jewish woman or a Christian woman. If God in the Quran is giving the Muslims the right, the Muslim men the right to marry and permission to marry a Jew or a Christian, how is that possible when he's commanding them to kill Jews and Christians? It doesn't make any sense. But what's happening is that people are misinterpreting the Quran out of sheer ignorance, and then coming and saying this is Islam, and it has nothing to do with Islam, and we have to stop it. We have to start representing Islam the way it's supposed to be represented by using the source texts and following what the Prophet Muhammad gave us, and stop lying upon Islam. It's unfair. It's unbefitting.
Okay, Akil, that was 4 minutes. That was just about perfect for the questions that you had. The thing is that when people look to the primary sources, they're going to look to Ibn Ishaq. They're going to look to the Quran, to the Hadith. And of course, we encourage them to read it within context and chronological order at that. But that's the thing. A lot of people around the world aren't going to listen to a person such as yourself. They may listen to you. I'm just saying they're not going to give you more authority than these old primary sources that all scholars are going to look to. You know what I'm saying? We appreciate, Akil, what you're saying. We appreciate that you do not support ISIS from what it sounds, and that you condemn what they're doing. We really love that, and we wish more Muslims around the world thought like you did right now. I mean, we wish that ISIS would have a change of mind to the point to where you are, saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this isn't what the Prophet did. But that isn't the case, you know, and it's who's going to hold more authority. A lot of us would consider a moderate Muslim versus the primary sources themselves. But Joe wanted to respond to, I think, your first point. So, Joe, and then we also have another caller on the line as well. And I still want to get to Rocky. But, of course, we know we have a 90-minute show and a lot of people and a lot of questions and all that. So, yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead, Joe.
I did want to touch on one argument that Akil made, and it's a common argument that I've heard from other Muslims when I've debated them online or engaged in discussion with them regarding Ibn Ishaq. And what Akil said is the common argument I hear. You can't trust Ibn Ishaq because he didn't use a reliable chain of narrators. For those who are unfamiliar, Islam requires any narration regarding Muhammad to be backed up by a reliable chain of narrators that passed on that tradition orally from the time the original person saw or heard Muhammad do whatever is being recorded until it got recorded, written down a couple hundred years later.
Isnad.
It's called an isnad. But the problem with Ibn Ishaq and the problem with Akil and what Akil is talking about is that he's trying to impose upon Ibn Ishaq a ruling or a requirement that did not exist at the time Ibn Ishaq wrote the biography. The laws of hadith, the science of hadith, was not fully developed for another 200 years after Ibn Ishaq lived. Yeah. And it was when the science of hadith was fully developed that the requirement became that any narration of Muhammad must be backed up by reliable isnad. And so the argument that Ibn Ishaq must be using a reliable chain of narrators is invalid. It's like saying the Wright brothers in the early 1900s, when they were first flying an airplane, flew that plane illegally because they didn't have a pilot's license. You know, it's an invalid argument.
Anachronistic, basically.
Right, it's anachronistic.
Yeah. And our caller who mentioned Reliance of the Traveler, that seems to be the most popular one on Amazon that people point to and all that. But that's just one of the 4 schools of Islamic jurisprudence. That's from the Shafi'i school, but there's also the Hanbali school, the Maliki school, and the Hanafi school.
Right.
And depending on which country you live under, not every country under Sharia, quote unquote, is under full, super strict Sharia, say like Saudi Arabia, who's on the follows the Hanbali school. But so it is a good source, but it's only one of the 4 basically law books of Islamic jurisprudence.
Right.
We have a caller on the line, but Rocky, we've had you on here. We appreciate your time for being on. We just want to give you an opportunity to share with our audience your thoughts at this point after hearing all of this information from Christians, from our gracious Muslim guest who has joined us on the show. Please.
Well, I would like to share that if you were today to go to Akil's home, I bet you he would cook you a wonderful meal, and he would go out of his way to be a great host to you. So that's one thing I want the viewers and the listeners to understand, is that the average Muslim is not what you see on television, those men that are wearing the head coverings. I agree with Akil in that regard. Not every Muslim wears this, face covering and wants to kill Christians and all of that. If you were to go to my mom's house, who is a Muslim, she would be absolutely hospitable to you. As a matter of fact, my mom, a few years ago, she cooked for 19 of my Christian friends, and they stood in front of her and they prayed over the food, and she blessed them and sat with them and loved them, and they loved her. And so the average Muslim, that is a great concern of mine as well, just as Akil's concern is that the average Muslim is not an ISIS. They're not radicalists. They want, especially those that come, the refugees, we automatically think that refugees are bad people, and ISIS is infiltrating them, and so on and so forth. These people have the same needs that an average American has. They want their kids to grow up and to go to school. They want their kids to marry good husbands and good wives. They want their kids to have a good life. That's what the average Muslim is. When we talk about the Bible, we have to also take into consideration how we interpret scripture, what is the background behind the passages, and all of that stuff. And so when you look at all these different opinions and different schools and different thoughts, you have to take that into consideration as well, that not everybody thinks that way, not everybody feels that way, not everybody believes that way.
Right. And we would agree that that's a good thing. I think all of us wish, we're the first to say, hey, we love Muslims, and we know that a large majority of Muslims are very hospitable, and they condemn ISIS too. And one of the things we hear most is, well, ISIS is not Islamic because look at who they're killing the most, is Muslims. But it's kind of begging the question, because they're assuming that they are Muslims. But if you ask ISIS, they'll say, well, no, they're not Muslims. They're just a little bit higher than the Jews and the Christians, because these moderate Muslims, or who ISIS would consider moderate, are not doing what they're doing. So they will kill a moderate Muslim, maybe just not maybe quicker than a Jew or a Christian, but it's not going to take them too much longer than that. But at the same time, we know that a large percent of Muslims in the world would line up more with what Akil is saying and what he holds to, and we think that is a good thing. We pray that there would be a world full of moderate Muslims. Now, our heart would still be that they would repent and put their trust in Christ, because I believe that if Akil died tonight, and I consider Akil a friend, and I'm not sure if Akil cooks or if he'll make me food if I go to his house, but I mean, I know that Christianity is true. I know who Jesus Christ is, and God bless Akil for what he is saying, but if he died tonight, he would end up in hell according to the Bible. And that is a bigger concern for me than anything else. But Noreen wants to talk here, and then we have another caller. So we thank God for all of you. So, Noreen.
And absolutely, I definitely, just by seeing Akil for just a few moments, he seems like a wonderful, wonderful, genuine person as a human, not judging him based on his religion. But I truly believe that, the hospitality, that whole welcoming into the home, like Akil would cook a dinner for us, that is a cultural trait that originates from the Middle East. The Middle Easterns, the Arabs, the Assyrians, the Jews, they're very hospitable. The whole culture is very, very unique. As far as I can give you reports of what happened to the Christians in Mosul, in Nineveh, these areas where they were living next door to door with Muslims, neighbors. They have lived with generations and generations. They've gone to each other's funerals, weddings, their children went to school together. When Daesh or ISIS invaded into these Christian areas, mainly Christian areas, and they had their Muslim neighbors, regardless, how long they knew each other, they literally turned them in. You know, unfortunately, this is what the Muslims did in Iraq. They marked our homes with the N for Nazarene, and just like the Holocaust. And they literally, these neighbors that they trusted, they did everything together, where some of them were taking part in the beheadings of these Christians. So, you know, that is heart-wrenching. That, as a Christian from the Middle East, not only as an Assyrian, that makes me not trust Muslims in Iraq, especially to be under their occupation, especially the Sharia law. I mean, these people, you know, we had family members that were getting turned in. They were getting purged out of their homes. Their neighbors were like, yep, that's the home right here. That's Christian, that's Christian, that's Christian. Why do you think the Christians were pointed out so quickly and purged out like they were cattle and being loaded in these trucks? And you know what? A lot of these Muslims as neighbors were taking part in this genocide. So I would love to see people like Akhil, you know, that believe in humanity, regardless of what their religion is. But unfortunately, the reality of what's happening in the Middle East and Iraq and Syria, you know, the demographics and everything is changing. You know, these Muslims that were moderate converted just like this into jihadists, and, you know, where even two brothers fighting, one was saying, you know, I can't believe my brother is taking part in Daesh, and he's actually beheading even some of our neighbors. And, you know, and it's really hard as a Christian to trust these people ever again. You know, and that's why Assyrian Christians, we're actually demanding for our internationally protected safe haven. We need to be protected by the West, or at least by even some Middle Eastern countries that believe in democracy and humanity, because Christianity is facing extinction under these type of ruling.
Definitely, and we really need to go to break. I think we're kind of over time of needing one, but the way I think of it too is, let's say the United States or whatever country you are in that is not under Sharia at this time. What if that came under Sharia? Which way would these moderate Muslims lean towards? Would they say, okay, well, if this is true Islam, or if this is my only choice, well, okay, then I'm just going to apostatize and leave Islam totally? Or are they going to, again, swing towards the direction of the and I don't even want to use the term radical. We can talk about that in a little bit, but I would say jihadist, militant, etc. If Sharia came in place where you live, which way would these moderate Muslims lean? Think about that during our break, because we have to take one, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
To all our viewers, you can now watch our shows on the following platforms, such as Android tablets, Android boxes, Android phones, a Chromecast stick, your smart TV, or a Roku stick. For more information, please call the number on your screen or visit us at trinitychannel.com.
Trinity Channel is now publicly streaming on Roku. There is no need for a code anymore, and through Roku, you can watch us 24/7 on your TV. You can find us through two ways on Roku. The first way is through the streaming channel category. The second way is by searching for Trinity Channel in your search bar. For more information, please call the numbers at your screen.
Thank you so much for watching the Trinity Channel. We are now airing in 8 states in the U.S. You can watch us through our YouTube channels at ABN English, Trinity Channel, or our website at trinitychannel.com. Be sure to look out for our live shows, which you can find when they are airing through our Facebook page or trinitychannel.com. We are only able to continue reaching the lost and spreading the message of Christ through your support and prayers. If you would like to support us or need prayer, please call us at 248-416-1300, or you can go to our website at trinitychannel.com. Together, we can spread God's love to the lost and hurting throughout the world.
Matthew in his gospel says, and this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Trinity Channel for the third day of this two-week apologetic marathon. It is a blessing and a privilege to have you here with us. There's a lot of TV channels you could be watching now instead, so we are so happy that you are here for this vitally important show on Sharia versus freedom and human rights. And we have a number of guests with us. Right now, to my left, we have Narain Anwiya, who's an activist who speaks out about what Christians in the Middle East are facing. And she has job security right now, and it's kind of an unfortunate thing because of all the things that are happening in the Middle East and what Christians are facing. Now, of course, to my far left, I have Joe Carey, who's been on a number of shows this week already. He has a master's degree in apologetics from Biola University and has been studying Islam in depth for a number of years and has a great website called radicaltruth.net that I recommend you check out. But we also have two Skype guests as well. First, we have Akil, one of our favorite Muslims in the world, who's always open to debate and dialogue. And he's been on a number of shows this week as well. We're glad to have him back again, and we're going to have him back again tomorrow. So we love Akil and his input into these shows. To be a Muslim voice, as moderate as that may sound to us and to other people. But we also have a former Muslim on the show. We have Rocky Nasser, who grew up in the Middle East and was a Muslim for 31 years. She's a speaker, evangelist, and author. And it's a blessing for her to be here, as little as everyone's kind of had to talk to. We've had callers and everything else. And right now we've had a caller who has been patiently waiting for a long time. And I know Joe wants to get to another point, but we want to do that after the caller. Tom, we thank you so much for calling in, and we apologize for the long wait, but welcome to the show.
Yes, I want to comment on what he said, because I don't like saying part of the truth, which is deception.
Okay, wait, hold on one second, Tom. When you said I don't like what when you said he, who are you referring to?
Okay, what I'm saying, I need to comment on what was said, because I believe that saying part of the truth is deception.
Okay.
The reason for this, the story of Bani Qurayza started when Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Al-Madinah, and he started building his force, and the people in Al-Madinah were so terrified, and generally, they ran away in the mountains as they leave their camels, their sheep, when they hear the Muslims are coming. So the Jewish people went to Muhammad asking him what is going on. We cannot live this way. So he asked them to sign a peace treaty with him, which is this was one of the first maybe written treaties. So they agreed on the treaties, part of the treaty, that they would defend the Medina in case of attack by other forces. And Muhammad went into his wars outside Al-Madinah and asked the Jewish tribe of Bani Qurayza to join him. They refused and said, you are going into a fight not to protect Al-Madinah. While he was there outside Al-Madinah, some people came to discuss with Bani Qurayza that they should join them and get rid of Muhammad and his people immediately. But Bani Qurayza refused completely, and they said that we have no problem with him. He's respecting his treaty. We are not going to join you. And these are recorded in the Islamic sources. But when Muhammad came, he claimed that they violated the agreement. He surrounded them, and eventually they asked, what wrong thing we did so you can attack us this way? So eventually they agreed on this arbitration, and they chose the guy from their tribe, thinking that he's going to be fair to them and nothing will happen to them. But it was a taqiyya, or a trap, because this guy actually joined the Muslims in their fight, and he was betraying Bani Qurayza. And now the guy is saying, how come he says that Bani Qurayza did something wrong to Muhammad? And even if you look, he was saying that this is the Jewish law. Are you talking about a Jewish law or Islamic law? So now, after all this, I can remind you of another thing about Shari'ah law and the freedom of religion. I remind him, I let him go and read the story of Al-Bagliyin. These were 8 men lost in the desert, came to Muhammad, refused to shelter them except when they become Muslims. So they agreed. And the same night, he ordered them to go and drink the milk and urine of camel. The next day, in the early morning, he converted from Islam, escaped the camp, and Muhammad in the morning found out what they did. He sent his people to get them back. They got them back. Muhammad himself cut off their 2 hands, 2 feet, and the gouges their 2 eyes.
Tom, we appreciate your call and how long you waited on the line. Is there a question here for one of the guests?
Sorry, one last sentence.
Okay, please make it end with a question mark.
Yes, the question mark is, why did he do this to them? It's because they converted from Islam, not because they stole the camels or did anything of these. Because here is a comment, the question has no meaning. I am disclosing the deception in the stories and the ignorance of the history. I would ask him to study Islam first before coming and defending Islam.
Okay, so it's for Akil, I guess. That's what I was asking at the beginning. Okay, thank you, Tom, for your call. We only have about 18 minutes left in the show, unless we are allowed to go overtime, which I would love to do. I've drank like half a cup of a big coffee, so I'm ready to go. But Joe, go ahead and make your next point that you wanted to do.
Yeah, the whole topic of the show was supposed to be Sharia and human rights, Sharia freedom and human rights. Right. And one thing I want to bring up is there was an interesting development many years ago. In 1948, the United Nations adopted, and it was adopted by all nations of the world, a piece of paper, a declaration known as the UN Declaration of Human Rights. This was adopted by all the nations of the world, but there are many Islamic nations, particularly Saudi Arabia and many others, that had many problems with the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and they couldn't. The reason they had problems with it is because there were certain articles within the UN Declaration of Human Rights that they could not agree to because they violated Sharia. Let me just read a couple of those out. Article 4 prohibits slavery. Now, it's interesting to know that there's never been an abolition movement in Islam. The Quran contains rules for slaves, and slavery is still practiced today in Muslim lands, particularly Mauritania. Article 5, no one shall be subject to torture or cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. But Sharia prescribes what we would call in the United States and many Western nations, Europe in particular, degrading punishments, cutting off the hands of thieves, cutting off the hands and foot of people who come against Islam. This is according to Sharia. Article 7, all are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. Yet in Muslim lands, the testimony of the Christian is not valid against a Muslim in a court of law. Article 10, everyone is entitled to full equality in a fair public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal. Again, Christians are not given that right in Muslim lands. Article 16, men and women of full age without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion have the right to marry and to found a family. Now, as Akil brought up, in Islam, a Muslim man is allowed to marry a Christian or Jewish woman, but the reverse is not true.
Right.
A Muslim woman cannot marry somebody outside the fold of Islam.
Why would a Muslim man not want to marry a non-Muslim woman and have Muslim children?
Yeah. Article 18, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Freedom of religion. Yes, in Muslim lands, you're allowed to become a Muslim, but you're not allowed to leave the fold of Islam. If you do, in many lands, in many Islamic nations, you lose your family, you could lose your job, you lose your source of income, and in some places, it's a capital crime.
Yeah.
You're put to death. Article 19, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. Yet, even recent history has shown that certain forms of expression are forbidden by Sharia, and Christians who openly criticize Islam, Muhammad, or the Quran face severe punishment. One particular noteworthy thing is Pakistan's 295C blasphemy law, where if you speak evil or speak ill against either Muhammad or the Quran or Islam in general, you can be put in prison, fined several $1,000s. There's currently a resolution pending before the United Nations called UN Resolution 1618, prohibiting defamation of religion, which goes against the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Now, because many Muslim nations had a problem with the UN Declaration of Human Rights in these articles, in 1990, there was another declaration written called the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam. It was kind of the parallel between the UN Declaration, and it's interesting that many of the problems that were problematic, articles that were problematic to Muslim countries in the UN Declaration have been corrected by the Cairo Declaration. And so the Cairo Declaration was adopted, and it is very Sharia friendly. And the Cairo Declaration starts by this very interesting clause. It says, all men are created equal in terms of basic human dignity, but not equal human rights.
Definitely. Interesting declaration to look up. And I was just mentioning the new Meccan Declaration, Mekkan, I believe, that I saw online. Look that up online. But, I mean, we see this, and a lot of times I hear Muslims quote, well, there's no compulsion in religion. Well, we see that definitely coming to Islam, but we don't see that leaving Islam, because if you live under Sharia and you leave Islam, you have a certain amount of time to repent and come back. If not, then you're dead, you know?
Right.
And I mean, even look to, like, let's take ISIS out of the picture for a moment, you know? Let's look to Saudi Arabia, that is under Sharia. How easy is it to go to Saudi Arabia and say, okay, I'm building a church here? It's not going to happen, right? And again, we're taking ISIS out of the picture. So if you're under Sharia, there is no freedom of public worship. Even Dubai, which is probably, I've heard, one of the most Americanized countries in the Middle East. Yes, churches exist, but they can't even have a public sign on the street, you know, advertising that they're there. There is no public giving out of Bibles. So just because a country is in the Middle East doesn't mean it's under, again, full Sharia. There are, you know, some, depending on the country, they have these different books of, yeah, at least not yet. But so, yeah, I mean, we have all kinds of mosques being built here, and we have freedom of religion in America. They can come and build mosques, right? Because we are more concerned about the truth and sharing the gospel with these Muslims who are building the mosques, who are attending the mosques, etc. But we cannot go to Saudi Arabia or other countries under Sharia and build even one church. And even if we could, that cross is not going to be any higher than the minaret in town. Now, speaking of Saudi Arabia, in countries that are under Sharia, and just countries in the Middle East in general. Now, Rain, why is it important to preserve the Christianity that is there right now? Because they're not really becoming more Christianized publicly. But we do see a mass exodus of Muslims leaving Islam and becoming Christians. A lot of it has to do with amazing dreams that they're having about Jesus.
Right.
So there isn't a whole lot of building of churches in the Middle East. But why is it important to preserve the Christianity that is currently still there, and how can this be done?
Absolutely. So Christianity, since the beginning of Christianity, and even since the rise of Islam, Christianity has always worked as a cushion, as an equilibrium, because Christianity in Christ is peace and love to all Muslims, to all Jews and atheists, anybody. Christians love everyone. The Christians in the Middle East, you know, we have always coexisted with everyone. We shared our knowledge with the Arabs, even when they were invading us, even when Islam was invading our nation. We always shared our knowledge with them, science, mathematics, just civilization. And so imagine when you take Christianity completely out of the picture, now what you have is the Sunnis and the Shias. It will be a holy war every day. So now what I am seeing in my homelands is a complete holy war between the Shias and the Sunnis, and then of course the Kurdish Muslims, who are also in many occasions very radical. Those are also Sunni Muslims, but then there's this holy war, and then the Christians are in the middle, and then we're also, you know, in different parts of history, we're attacked by different groups. So when you remove us, it's just going to be the end of the world. I mean, they will be at it, at a complete war, and there will be complete chaos spilled over in the Middle East. So that's why it's very important to preserve it there, because we need an equilibrium there. We need a cushion. A lot of the Sunnis and the Shias would turn to the Christians because they always trusted the Christians. That's why all of the chefs for the Muslim presidents were always Christian, because they trusted them. Why weren't any of their chefs Muslim? You know, because there was always some sort of retaliation or some sort of holy war, jihad between them. But all their chefs, with their food and their families, they trusted. The caretakers of their families were Christian. Their chefs were Christian. Their doctors many times were Christian. And I believe how we can do it is at this moment, because the trust is gone, because of what we've seen, evidence, proof, not verbiage. I don't need to hear any testimonies from any Muslims claiming that this is peaceful. I am responding to what we're seeing. What we're seeing in the Middle East, what we are experiencing is horrendous. And the only way to protect the Christians is we have to have our own region at this moment. So how do you preserve Christianity in Iraq is we need to have an internationally protected region for the Assyrian Christians, for the minorities, Yazidis, and other Christians, protected by National Guard units. And then that is the only way we can revive Christianity. We can rebuild our churches. All of our churches have either been turned into Islamic centers. They went on top of the churches, removed the crosses. A lot of the churches were blown up, detonated, floored to the ground. This is what we are seeing, unfortunately, and a lot of this did come from our neighbors or our people we thought we were friends. I do have to say we do have quite a few good Muslims that are working alongside with the Christians, and they are trying to fight this evil force that we are experiencing. But I truly believe, it's the end times are near. I mean, from what we're seeing, it's pure chaos. And really, the only way is the Muslims have to rise up against this, because there are many more of them in the Middle East. And, if they all thought like Aqil, they need to rise up against this. That words don't mean anything. You need to do something physical and stand up against them. That even if one day they were to face people like ISIS who are claiming they're the real Muslims, that they need to stand against them and, not kind of push us to the front. The Christians here, kill them, behead them, they're right here.
Yeah. And speaking of ISIS, you look to their Dabiq, you hear these different terms. Dabiq, I think is another way it's pronounced, but D-A-B-I-Q, basically. This is not only a place in Upper Syria near Aleppo, but also it is the propaganda magazine that they use. And Dr. David Cashin, who's been on a number of shows, he studies the ISIS propaganda, advertisements, promo videos, magazines, all that kind of stuff. And even he will say that their propaganda, whether it be video, magazine, whatever, it is full of hadith literature. It's full of Quranic verses. So to say, oh, ISIS is not Islamic, ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, it's in the name, right? But we have the outside standard. People say, oh, well, look at Hitler, he was a Christian. The KKK, they were Christian. No, we can say that they were not because we have an outside standard. We have the New Testament and we have the words of Christ himself. If anyone says they're a Christian and they don't line up with what Jesus said to do, they are not a Christian. Same thing goes for Islam. If a person says, hey, I'm a Muslim, and they live a jihadist life, and you have another Muslim who lives a moderate life, well, who is the outside standard, because either one of these Muslims are lying about this is true Islam or no, this is true Islam, or one of them is misinformed, one of the two. But we have to take the outside standard, Muhammad, the Quran, the Hadith, the Sirah literature, etc. Who is the standard in Christianity? Jesus and the New Testament. Who's the standard in Islam? Muhammad and the Quran and the Hadith. Now we have we only have 5 minutes left in the show, but we do have a caller again. I'm not sure.
I think he left.
He left?
He dropped out.
Okay, he left. Never mind. Okay.
And Tony, we have to also look at what's happening. The Middle East is a pure example of what will happen to the rest of the world. So, you know, like we were speaking about the civilization and how science was invented in these areas and mathematics and the cradle of civilization, it is literally reversing. It's going backwards to the caveman times. You know, instead of the Middle East becoming one of the most thriving areas in the world, cradling civilization even to a higher degree, and evolving technology even further than it's become today, it's going backwards. I mean, just look at women. Women have no rights. As a woman myself, you know, going into the Middle East, women have no rights, let alone even the Virgin Mary. I mean, she wasn't completely covered where she can't even show barely her fingers in some regions in the Middle East. This is ridiculous. We're not cavemen here. You know, they really need to wake up as humans and understand what it's doing to the world. And it's spreading, this Wahhabi ideology is spreading to the entire world. Look what's happening in Europe. Some people think that it's just exaggerated. The proof is right there. All you have to do is go to the Middle East if nobody believes it. Go and see what is happening to these people. You know, and they really truly need to wake up now, because really these minorities and these Syrian Christians and Christians in general, we don't have much time, you know, and we really wanted to. We were the first people to accept them in. We wanted to accept them in. We did. We wanted to coexist with them, show them peace and love, and now look what's happened to us. 300,000 in Iraq, and we, in this lifetime, people that have studied about us in their ancient history classes, for almost 7,000 years of existence, because of radical Islam, now we are almost extinct. So we want to believe what you're saying. We want to believe that it's peace. But is it truly peace today? Is it?
Thank you, Noreen. I want to give everybody just, I can't even give you a minute because I only have 3 minutes left in the show. But I want everyone to give a little bit of closing thoughts. Was that your closing thoughts for the show? Okay, thank you so much. Joe, let's go to you, and then let's go to Akil, and let's go to Rocky, and then I'll have to be closing up the show because my coffee's not wearing off, but we're leaving anyway. So
okay, all right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, when we talk about the issue between Islam and human rights and freedom and dignity and all this, we only need to look back at history to see that there is no freedom, there is no human rights in Islamic nations controlled by Sharia. We've been talking a lot about ISIS because that's the hot topic that's in the news. But if you look further back in history, just look last year during the Arab Spring in Egypt. It wasn't ISIS that were burning the houses of Christians. It wasn't ISIS that was destroying the churches. It was the regular, normal, everyday Muslims there. We see these things going on all the time in Islamic lands. Christians are persecuted. Churches are burned. Their businesses are destroyed. And these are not by radical Muslims. These are by your normal, everyday Muslim neighbor next door. So, no, there is no freedom in Islam. There is no protection of other classes. Everything is in favor of Muslims. Okay. Christians don't have protection. Jews don't have protection. Non-Muslims don't have any protection. There is no freedom. There are no human rights. And that's the historical reality.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, Akil. We just got 6 more minutes. That's good. That's good. Okay. Akil, I'm going to go ahead and give you 2 of those minutes. So go ahead.
Okay, bismillah. Mr. Carey said so much, but I find it, I have to be honest, disturbing that he makes these sweeping statements against Islam. And he said, look at history, and then he told us about 1 year ago. That's not history. I mean, but you mentioned the outside standard. You mentioned the outside standard. So I want to just employ an outside standard in terms of Islam. I'll give you a hadith and a verse from the Qur'an. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said that whoever of you sees an evil, a munkar, then let him change it with his hand. And if he can't change it with his hand, then he change it with his tongue. And if he can't change it with his tongue, then he hate it in his heart, and this is the weakest of faith. This is the weakest of faith. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said, help your brother if he's oppressing or if he's being oppressed. And his companion said, we understand how we can help him if he's being oppressed, but how do we help him if he's oppressing? He said, by stopping him from his oppression, stopping him from wronging others. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said, beware of the prayer, the supplication of the person that's oppressed, because it goes straight to God with no barrier, whether the person is a Muslim or a non-Muslim who's being oppressed. This is what the Prophet Muhammad said about oppression. When we apply these verses and these standards of Prophet Muhammad, we cannot have what we have with ISIS or anybody that's harming people in their land. This is the dictate of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Why are we not mentioning these hadith? Why are we not mentioning these verses where Allah says, had we not set on one people against the other people by means to stop them, you would have churches and synagogues and monasteries and mosques tore down. This is what Islam says. But why only mentioning the events of history and not what the source text says? This is unfair and it's disingenuous, and we got to stop doing it. We have to stop lying upon Islam. This is from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why are we not mentioning these things to show what Islam is?
Thank you, Akil.
Okay, Akil,
that
real quick, I just want to respond to that in
okay.
10, 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Akil, why then, answer me this question, why do so many Muslims around the world not get what you just said?
Because they're disenfranchised. I mean, you have foreign policy. Look at what's happening over there.
No, it has nothing to do with foreign policies. Let's not bring politics into it.
Okay, Akil, okay, that was your 2 minutes. I thank you so much for that, but I want to give you just a few more seconds to go ahead and give us and our viewers the references to what you just said when you were quoting Muhammad.
There's a hadith, and you find the hadith, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I mean, I'm quoting from memory, so the exact location of the hadith, I can find it for you, send it to you. But I quote them again so they can find them. They Sahih Hadith, Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. In the book of oppression, there's a whole chapter in Sahih Bukhari called Kitab al-Dhulm, the book of oppression. And the first hadith you find in there that beware of the supplication of the oppressor, because it goes straight to God with no barrier.
Okay.
Even if the person is a non-Muslim.
So do you have any specific verses that you can give our audience right now, though?
Yeah, I give you one verse in the Quran where Allah mentions about stopping. In Surah 22, verse 40, Allah mentions about those who stop people from their oppression, and He checks one group by another group. So, for instance, the sister, she was right. The Muslims should be rising up, stopping people like Daesh and the people over there. It's the Muslims' duty to stop them. But, I mean, we have to look at also the political agenda behind this, and we don't have time for that. But in Surah 22, verse 40, God mentions quite clearly that people have to stop others from oppressing people. Persecution is worse than slaughter.
Okay.
You can't harm and oppress people. It's against Islam.
Okay, Akil, thank you. What we do want to allow our audience to know as well is that, Akil, even if he did have verses, references, etc., and I would encourage all of you to write those down and to check out what they say, but something that we need to let our audience know, just in case they don't know, is if I handed you a Bible and I said, okay, read it, and you read from cover to cover, you're going to get a pretty much chronological view. I mean, you do have to insert some Psalms in the Old Testament, insert some epistles through the book of Acts, etc., but you're going to get a pretty much chronological view. That is not the case with the Quran. It's organized from basically longest chapter to shortest chapter. So unless you know which surahs or which chapters came at whatever particular times, during the Meccan period or the Medinan period, that's why it's so common for many Muslims to quote verses. Some sound peaceful, some sound more aggressive. Unless you know which ones came later that abrogate earlier verses, you can make it say whatever you want to say, just like the Bible. You can start picking out verses, make it say whatever you want it to say if you're just going to make a theology out of one verse or an entire command out of one verse. So I would encourage our audience to look into that. We can give you sources and references to look into that more. But no, it's not chronological. And even the hadith, the sayings of Muhammad are not the supposed eternal word of Allah like the Qur'an is, which we don't believe it is, but that's the belief at least. But just like the Qur'an isn't ordered chronologically cover to cover, the hadith, the sayings that he said came at different times as well. So you have earlier hadith, you have later hadith, etc. So unless you know that, Muslims can say whatever they wanted to say. But we thank you for being on the show today. And Rocky is still here. I sure hope Rocky's still here. Rocky, let's give you a minute, please.
Thank you very much. What I would like to say is that if you look at Islam and Christianity, Islam means submission. So the religion in and of itself is to submit to the will of Allah and to submit to the Shari'ah law. Human rights are not considered as important as submitting to Allah and to following His decrees and to following His order. So Akil mentioned that when someone does a mistake, the first thing that they're supposed to change it with is their hand, which means a physical thing, that it needs to be done physically. It needs to be changed physically. If you can't do it, then you do it with your mouth. If you can't do it, then in your heart, and that is the weakest of faith. That is a true hadith that Muhammad has said. In contrast to Christianity, Christ says that he came to set us free. It is for freedom that he has set us free. So not just to give us freedom as human rights to do whatever we want. He basically said we're going to be slaves, right? We're either a slave to wickedness or a slave to righteousness. And as believers in Jesus Christ, we submit ourselves to his lordship, and there is freedom in that. So he gives us freedom from having to worry about what we do and what we say and how we do it and how we say it. We can't, no matter what we do, we can never be good enough. No matter how hard we try, we can never try hard enough. What is God's standard? For all have sinned and fallen short of God's glory. No matter how hard I try, no matter how hard Akil tries, no matter how hard you, Tony, try, you can never be 100% righteous. Right?
I just stopped trying because it's like I know it's futile. So you know. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that it is known that when you become a Christian, that is not a license to sin. And if you think that it is, that is wrong. Also, some of you in the East may look to the West and say, oh yeah, the West, everyone's a Christian. No, Christianity and Americans are completely separate. There are many Christians in America, just like there's Christians in the Middle East. But it is not it is a faith. It isn't a area of where you live. So
American culture does not represent Christianity.
Right.
No.
So I'm going to give Narain 30 seconds, and then I am going to close our show so that we can all do something else, I guess.
Thanks so much, Tony. So I would like to say, as an Assyrian Christian, I want to tell the viewers, as someone who has people in the Middle East, and they happen to be everyone's brothers and sisters, that we don't have much time. Our time is ticking in your lifetime. And I would like to tell our viewers, no matter what religion you are, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or an atheist, to let you know that our people, humanity, and the Christians especially in the Middle East are in dire need. We are literally facing extinction, so however you can help, you need to contact your decision makers. You need to spread the truth of love and spread the truth of what's truly happening in the Middle East, and tell global leaders and policymakers that, you know what, I want to do something about my brothers and sisters in Iraq and Syria that are facing extinction. Why didn't I know about this? I want to send arms to them. I want to send international protection to them. They need safe havens. We really need you to rise up with us, because this truly, truly is the end of our time. Unfortunately, I'm really seeing it. Literally, Christianity is getting eliminated from Iraq, from Syria, especially in Iraq, you know, in the ancient ancestral lands there. But we really need you to stand with us. And if you need any information further about the current events that are happening there where Christianity originated, you can contact me on my social media. You just plug in my name and you'll find me. And God bless you all.
Thank you for Narain for being here. And folks, look up Narain online. Look up Joe Carey, myself, Rocky Nasser, Akil. We're all on Facebook. And as you know, as you've heard, this could be like probably a 5-hour show just because there's so much stuff to talk about. But we thank you for being with us. And a few interesting term that came up tonight that Narain mentioned, and I've heard other people, and I hear it in the media a lot now too, is Wahhabism. The thing is that Wahhabism is named after Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who lived in the 1700s. But is that when this problem started, or was it before then? Wahhab did have a view, and in collaboration with Ibn Saud, to create what we now know as Saudi Arabia. But tomorrow's, the first show tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time is, does Islam need a reformation, and can there be one? And just like this show, that is going to be a very interesting show with more guests, more interesting guests. We're going to have a Muslim on that show. We're going to have a former Muslim on that show, those who have lived in the Middle East, etc. And we're going to talk about Wahhabism and also some other terms that you may not have heard that point further back to Muhammad himself and the earliest followers. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being here. We are so grateful for you, and the Trinity Channel is grateful for you and all that you give to support the Trinity Channel. We would encourage you to give, whether it's a one-time gift or a monthly pledge. Please support the Trinity Channel so that these shows can continue. You see how informative they are, and you see how maybe entertaining they are. I mean, you might not even be a Christian, but you're like, hey, this is more interesting than, you know, some other show I can watch. So whatever reason you like the Trinity Channel, we ask that you would support it, give financially, and also pray for the Trinity Channel. These shows are going out everywhere, and we're trying to get them out even further than they are right now. Right now, this is not showing up in Asia, but we would like it to. So please give and support the Trinity Channel. We thank God for you, and again, for all of our guests. God bless you, and we hope to see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for another 4 shows tomorrow.
To all our viewers, you can now watch our shows on the following platforms, such as Android tablets, Android boxes, Android phones, a Chromecast stick, your smart TV, or a Roku stick. For more information, please call the number on your screen or visit us at trinitychannel.com.
Trinity Channel is now publicly streaming on Roku. There is no need for a code anymore, and through Roku, you can watch us 24/7 on your TV. You can find us through 2 ways on Roku. The first way is through the streaming channel category. The second way is by searching for Trinity Channel in your search bar. For more information, please call the numbers at your screen.
Thank you so much for watching the Trinity Channel. We are now airing in 8 states in the U.S. You can watch us through our YouTube channels at ABN English, Trinity Channel, or our website at trinitychannel.com. Be sure to look out for our live shows, which you can find when they are airing through our Facebook page or trinitychannel.com. We are only able to continue reaching the lost and spreading the message of Christ through your support and prayers. If you would like to support us or need prayer, please call us at 248-416-1300 or you can go to our website at trinitychannel.com. Together, we can spread God's love to the lost and hurting throughout the world.
Matthew in his gospel says, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come."